My husband didn't just use my words against me in arguments. He literally used my therapy against me. With copies of my sessions, my diagnoses, and my deepest trauma printed out in a folder labeled legal. My name is Sarah. I'm 40. My husband's name is Michael. He's 46. We've been together 12 years, married for 9. No kids, 1 dog, a nice house in the suburbs. The whole "we're doing fine" package. From the outside, we looked solid. He's corporate, makes good money. I work in marketing, hybrid schedule. We host barbecues, send Christmas cards, smile in pictures. Inside, I was falling apart slowly. Panic attacks, insomnia, crying in my car before going into work. I kept telling myself I was just stressed. Middle age, pandemic, economy, whatever. Michael was the one who kept saying, "You should go to therapy, babe. I just want you to be happy. Talk to someone, work through your childhood stuff." It sounded supportive, loving. I thought, wow, I'm lucky. My husband actually wants me to get help. So yeah, he was the one who pushed me into therapy. I didn't realize he was also planning to weaponize it. A little background. My childhood was messy. Dad was emotionally abusive. Mom was checked out. Lots of shouting, name-calling, silent treatment, walking on eggshells. I grew up thinking everything was my fault. Michael knew all that. We'd had those 3 a.m. trauma dump conversations early in the relationship. He held me while I cried. He said stuff like, "I'll never treat you like that. You're safe with me." And for a long time, he wasn't that bad. He was impatient, a bit controlling, but nothing that screamed, "Run." Then in my mid-30s, things started getting harder. I got laid off once, had to find a new job. My mom got sick. I helped her a lot. My hormones started going nuts. I was exhausted, snappy, anxious. Michael's favorite refrain became, "You're overreacting. You're too sensitive. You always make everything about your feelings." He'd say horrible shit in an argument, and if I reacted, he'd go, "See, this is why we can't talk. You get hysterical." So when he said go to therapy, I thought he was right. There was obviously something wrong with me, right? I found a therapist through my insurance portal. Let's call her Dr. Laura. Female, late 40s. Calm voice. Office with plants and those stupid inspirational posters. I started seeing her weekly. At first, it was good. I unloaded my childhood stuff, my fear of abandonment, my people-pleasing, my panic attacks. I cried a lot. She listened, nodded, asked questions like, "What does little Sarah need in this moment?" It felt cheesy, but it helped. For the first time in my life, I was saying things out loud that I'd never told anyone. I talked a lot about Michael, too. How he'd roll his eyes at my feelings. How he'd make jokes at my expense in front of friends. How he'd say, "You're just like your mom," whenever I was upset. Dr. Laura never called him abusive. She said things like, "It sounds like you two have communication issues. Have you tried telling him how his words affect you?" I thought she was being neutral, professional. After a few sessions, she suggested, "Would you be open to inviting Michael for a couple session at some point?" I hesitated. I didn't want him in my safe space, but he'd been the one pushing me to go, so maybe it would help. I mentioned it to him at dinner. To me, Dr. Laura thinks it might be good for us to do a session together sometime. He perked up. "Oh yeah? We can do that. I'd love to understand what's going on with you better." It sounded sweet. It'll be important later. Around month 3, something started to feel off. Michael suddenly had new vocabulary. Therapy vocabulary. We'd argue, and he'd say, "This isn't about me, it's your abandonment wound talking." Or, "You're catastrophizing again. That's your trauma response." Or my favorite, "You're projecting your father onto me. That's unfair and you know it." Those are my therapist's words. I had never used them with him. I hadn't told him I had an abandonment wound. I didn't talk like that around him. With him, I'd say, "I feel scared you'll leave," or "I feel like I'm not enough." The phrasing was too specific, too clinical. The first couple times, I brushed it off. Maybe he'd read a book. Maybe he'd Googled something. I mean, he's a smart guy. Then one night, I had a pretty bad panic attack. Heart racing, hyperventilating, shaking. Michael sat there staring at me with this analytical look, like he was observing a science experiment. When I finally started to calm down, he said, "You know, Dr. Laura thinks your panic attacks are mostly because you avoid conflict and then it explodes." I froze. "What? Your therapist," he said, totally casual. "She told you that, right? Or something like that?" My heart stopped for a full beat. "How do you know what she thinks?" I asked slowly. He shrugged. "I mean, that's what she would think, based on what you tell her, isn't it?" That answer felt wrong, slippery. I pushed. "Have you talked to her?" He rolled his eyes. "Babe, calm down. I'm not conspiring with your therapist. I'm just saying what's obvious." I dropped it. But that sentence, "Dr. Laura thinks," stuck in my head like a splinter. Twist number one came from something stupid, a forgotten email. A few weeks later, I was on my laptop, paying bills, and noticed my email was logged in on the browser. Michael had borrowed it the night before to print something. I saw a new email at the top. Subject: Session Summary, Sarah M., Confidential, from Dr. Laura. That's normal. She sometimes sends short follow-ups. I clicked it. Except it wasn't for me. It started like, "Hi, Michael. As discussed, here's a brief summary of what we covered in Sarah's last session and some suggestions on how you can support her." My whole body went cold. My therapist was summarizing my individual sessions to my husband. Bullet points: ongoing work around father's emotional abuse, a high sensitivity to criticism, deep fear of abandonment, hypervigilant to perceived rejection, 2, being into herself when she feels attacked. Then, for you as a partner, avoid raising your voice in conflict. Don't make jokes about her being dramatic. If she cries, try physical comfort first. Please do not threaten divorce breakup during fights. This is especially triggering for her. At the bottom, as we talked about on the phone, it's important not to throw this information in her face during arguments. I just stared at the screen, shaking. Michael had talked to my therapist on the phone without me. She had sent him strong notes about my trauma. I scrolled up. There were more. As we discussed, Sarah is working through guilt around not wanting children. She feels responsible for your happiness in an unhealthy way. She has expressed fear that you will trade her in for someone younger. Every line felt like a knife. This wasn't couples therapy. This was espionage. When Michael came home that night, I was sitting at the dining table with my laptop open, that email on the screen. He walked in, saw my face, and his smile died. "What's wrong?" "You tell me," I said, turning the laptop toward him. He looked at the email. I watched his whole body tense up. "I can explain," he started. "You'd better," I said, "because right now it looks like my therapist has been handing you a cheat sheet on how to manage and manipulate me." He raised his hands like I was a cop and he was getting arrested. Okay. Look, I didn't ask her to violate anything. I just reached out once, early on, because I was worried. I wanted to know how to help you. So she just volunteered my entire trauma history?" I snapped, "without asking me, without telling me?" "It wasn't like that," he said. "She said she could give me general guidance as your spouse. She wanted us to be on the same team." I laughed. It sounded insane, even to me. On the same team? Michael, you've been using these words to win arguments. You literally used abandonment wound on me last week like a weapon. He went quiet. I pointed to the screen. "You knew I was scared you'd leave me. You knew I feel like a burden. You knew I freeze when I feel attacked. And instead of protecting those wounds, you poked every single one. He stayed silent for a full 10 seconds. Then he said, I was frustrated. You were making everything about your trauma. I thought maybe if I held up a mirror. You held up a knife, I snapped. You took privileged information from my therapist and turned it into ammo. He tried the classic flip. Why are you mad at me and not at her? She's the one who sent the emails. Spoiler, I was mad at both. Next session, I confronted Dr. Laura. I sat down, looked her in the eye and said, have you been discussing my sessions with my husband? She did that therapist pause, folded her hands, took a breath. I can see you're very upset, she said. Yes, I said, because I read emails where you summarized my trauma to him, without my consent. She looked genuinely surprised for half a second. I'll give her that. Then composed herself. Michael reached out early on. Very concerned about you, she said. We had a brief consultation about how he could support your healing. I only shared general patterns, nothing specific you hadn't told him. You told him about my abandonment fear. You told him I feel like a burden. You told him not to threaten divorce. That was private. She shifted in her chair. In couples work, it's sometimes appropriate. We weren't in couples work then. I cut her off. Those were my solo sessions. You never asked me if you could talk to him. You never told me you had. You never told me you were sending him notes. Long silence. You're right, she finally said. I should have been more explicit about the boundaries and obtained written consent before consulting with him. I was shaking. He's been using those notes against me, I said quietly, throwing my therapy words in my face, making me feel insane and broken. Laura looked genuinely stricken. I don't know if it was guilt or fear of a lawsuit. That was never my intention, she said. I wanted to enlist his support. Well, I said, standing up, you enlisted the wrong side. I walked out and never went back. Twist number 2 came when I realized he knew more than what was in those emails. A few weeks after I stopped therapy, Michael and I had a huge fight. It started over something small. Me not answering a text fast enough while I was out with a friend. Classic. He escalated as usual. You're selfish. You don't care how I feel. You're just like your mother. I snapped and said, I'm tired of being emotionally blackmailed in my own house. He looked me dead in the eye and said, this is exactly why your therapist suggested you try EMDR. Because you can't distinguish past from present. I froze. I had one 1-hour consult with a new therapist after leaving Dr. Laura. We talked about maybe trying EMDR. I never told Michael her name, never gave him any info, never even scheduled a follow-up. How do you know about EMDR? I asked slowly. You told me, he said too quickly. No, I didn't. I went quiet. He realized he'd slipped. He changed tactics. Look, if you're going to throw around therapy language, I should at least know what's going on, right? I know your password. I saw some of the intake emails. I wasn't trying to snoop. I just wanted the full picture. Full picture. Twist number 2. He had been logging into my email and patient portals, reading my intake forms, homework, even journaling assignments. All the shit I wrote like, I feel like I'm failing as a wife. Sometimes I wonder if I deserve to be happy. I'm scared if I set boundaries, he'll leave. He had read all of it. So you've been spying on my therapy? I said, I live with you, he shot back. If you're going to make huge mental health decisions, I deserve to know what's being fed into your head. I think something inside me broke right there. Because at that moment I realized there was nothing sacred. Nothing private. No safe room in my brain he hadn't tried to pry open. Twist number 3 came from a manila folder. I was looking for our tax returns in his home office drawer one day. Michael wasn't home. In the bottom drawer was a folder labeled S Personal in his handwriting. I assumed it was my old cards or something. I opened it. Instead, I found printed emails from Dr. Laura. printed intake forms from my new therapist, screenshots of my text messages with my best friend from some backup program he'd installed, a Word document titled Sarah Patterns. I opened it. It was like reading a psych report written by a prosecutor. Bullet points. Tends to overreact, especially around perceived rejection. History of anxiety and depression, documented in medical records. Multiple therapists confirm difficulty regulating emotions. Attachment issues, fear of abandonment, might fabricate or exaggerate to keep partner close. Then, if divorce becomes necessary, emphasize mental health issues. Show she is unstable/prone to panic. Use therapist emails as evidence of emotional volatility. Argue for sole control over finances/house due to her fragility. He had dates, quotes from my sessions, screenshots of things I'd said about myself in therapy, reframed as proof that I was unfit to make decisions. He wasn't just using my therapy to win fights. He was building a case file. Not for couples counseling, for divorce court. There was even an email draft, unsent, in his documents. Dear attorney, I would like to schedule a consultation regarding separation from my wife. She is currently in treatment for anxiety and trauma-related issues, and I have concerns about her stability. My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd faint. All that go to therapy, babe. I just want you to heal. He'd been encouraging me to generate paperwork on why I was damaged. Paperwork he could use. Twist number 4 was the cherry on top. I hired my own lawyer. I had the folder, the emails, screenshots. I was ready for war. We sat in her office, and she went through everything quietly. Then she looked up and said, "This is ugly. But I'm going to tell you something that might actually help you." "What?" I asked, bracing myself. "If he tries to use your therapy and mental health records in court against you, any decent judge is going to see that as coercive and manipulative, especially with these emails. What he thinks makes you look unstable, it actually makes him look controlling and abusive." She pointed at the bullet points he wrote. "He documented that he encouraged you to get treatment, then deliberately used confidential information to undermine you. That's textbook weaponization. This folder doesn't help him. It helps you." For the first time in months, I felt not good, but less crazy. Because up until that point, Michael had me convinced that I was broken. I overreacted. I was making a big deal out of nothing. Seeing a professional say, "No, this is messed up," cracked the spell. Right now, here's where things are. I moved out 3 months ago. I'm renting a small apartment with ugly carpet and the best damn locks I've ever seen. I changed all my passwords, got a new email, new therapist, and told her on day 1, "If anyone who isn't me contacts you about my sessions, I want to know immediately." Michael is still in our house, sending me long texts about how we can still fix this, how therapy poisoned me against him, how those emails are being taken out of context. He's also claiming he's the victim. "You're punishing me for caring too much. I only wanted to help your therapist see the full picture. You're throwing away our marriage because you can't handle accountability." There are days I wonder if I'm overreacting, if maybe I should have stayed. If maybe this is just a boundary issue like some people online would say. But then, I remember, he knew my deepest fear was being abandoned, and he wrote, "Use abandonment fear, too. Argue she's unstable," in a folder. He knew I was ashamed of my panic attacks, and he planned to put them on display for a judge. He knew therapy was the only place I felt safe enough to be fully honest, and he planted himself right in the middle of that space like a spy. That's not love. That's control with a concerned husband mask on. So if you've listened this far, I really want to know. If you found out your partner had been talking to your therapist behind your back, reading your private notes, and building a legal case out of your vulnerabilities, would you ever be able to trust them again? Would you stay and try to rebuild after that level of betrayal, or walk away and protect whatever is left of your mind and privacy? Because right now, I'm a 40-year-old woman sitting in a cheap apartment with a second-hand couch, trying to learn how to have feelings out loud without wondering who's taking notes and how they're going to use them against me later.